Just joining us.
Okay, so welcome back, everybody. And I hope you can see the presentation. Maybe I'll leave it like this. Okay, so we've already discussed, this is already the third meeting in our third session in our series. We discussed the Aleph and Bet. And as we did last time, we'll do a bit of a review. As long as I can get my computer to page down. And like I try to do also each time, give another little bit of a couple of additions. It's always good to add in, some new spice to the food. So we said that Aleph is the spiritual source. Okay, Aleph is Hashem. It's the source of everything spiritual in the world. Aleph is Elokim. Okay, we spoke about the shape of the Aleph and the sound of the Aleph. And then we said on the completely almost opposite to that, or balancing that, or completing it, is the Bet, which is the physical infrastructure where the Aleph can exist in. Okay, so Bet on the one hand, it limits the Aleph, because if we have too much spirituality, too much light, we won't be able to, in this limited world, or us as limited beings, be able to handle it. And it also provides Aleph with a platform or an infrastructure to exist in this physical world. Something new that we didn't mention last week is that the word Bet also stands for Bina or Bniya. Okay, the Gemara says that Bina Yetera Nitla Leisha, that a woman has got more understanding than a man. As opposed to that, see the woman nodding, the men have got Yoter Chokhmah. So what is the difference between Chokhmah and Bina? On a simple level, Chokhmah is knowledge that you received, that you've heard from somebody, maybe you comprehend it. Bina is in taking this knowledge into yourself, understanding it, chewing on it, developing it, and turning it into something practical. The term that the Gemara uses is Lahavin davar mitoch davar, to understand something from something else. And the mashal, the example, the parable that the Gemara brings is that if you got a banker, they used to call it a shulchani, because the bankers then used to, they didn't have big banks like they have today. They just had people opened a table and used to swap money. So if you have a shulchani, a banker, and he's got his money, that's the chokhmah. He's got lots of money and he can deal with it. But if suddenly he loses the money and he's able to think of things to get money back, that's already bina. You're able to do something with it. And it's very interesting that the word bniya, to build, binyan, is based on the same word. Okay? Because what you do when you build something, you take bricks, which are like the chokhmah, the raw material, and you turn it into something practical or something different, something useful. Just like a woman can take the man's chokhmah and turn it into something practical. By the way, it's also with a physical relationship between man and woman. When a baby is conceived, a man can inject approximately 100 million sperm at a time, but the woman is capable of limiting it, just taking just one of them. But on the other hand, she turns the sperm together with her egg into a person. And the other 999 all die. But if it wasn't for the ability to limit it and turn it into something, to livnot it or to build it, all of them would die. So that is the quality of bniya. Okay, this is the bina. And we mentioned that you put the aleph and the bet together, you get av, which are a parent or a father, etc. Something I didn't mention last week, that if you look at the word bracha or berech, to bless somebody, it's spelled bet resh kaf. And if we go back to the table of gematriot, bet has got the value of 2, kaf has got the value of 20, and resh has got the value of 200. Okay, it takes up this whole row. Oops. So the quality of bracha is 2. Why? Because what is a bracha? Bracha is when one force influences another force, and the two of them together make something new. Just like the man and the woman, or like the Aleph and the Bet, make the Av. Okay, and if you look at other words in Hebrew that have got the same root, bracha, there are at least two of them. One is the word havracha. Okay, I don't think any of us on this call are agriculturists, but if you take a tree, especially a grapevine, and you bend it over into the ground, and you bury a little bit of the branch, and you let the other part of the branch come out of the ground, right? So you got the trunk. One of the branches goes down back into the ground, sort of making an upside down U shape, or a chet, so we talk about Hebrew, goes into the ground and out again. After a while, that little piece of branch that's in the ground will shred roots, and then you can disconnect it from the mother tree, and you get a new tree. That process is called havracha. Again, it's taking something from a source and making it developing into something else. Another word that comes from bracha is brecha, a pool, right? Now, not about necessarily a swimming pool, although it's the same thing, but the original brecha, the original pool that was in the ancient times, was the water source, right? Like the water towers that we have today. And what happens when you have a water tower? You have a source of water that's like the chokhmah up top, and then all the users open up their tap, and by opening up the tap, they cause the water to come into the house. Again, you have this duality. That is what the word bracha is. I remember my late father once questioning me. He says, "How can it be we say Baruch Hu et Hashem HaMubarach? Who are we to bless God?" You know, it's almost a chutzpah. And I think this is the answer to that very good question that my dad asked. It's not that we're blessing God. It's not that we're giving, we're going to tell God that he'll be rich and he'll be healthy. It's not relevant to him, and he doesn't need us for that. But what it means is that by us receiving God's presence, receiving God's spirituality as much as we can, we create this duality. And this duality creates bracha for spreading over. And again, that's the link, the same the duality of the Aleph and Bet, and that is the bracha. And by the way, it's also the word berech, which is a knee, because when you daven, you bend your knee, showing this connection to Hashem by making yourself subordinate to Him. Again, the duality. Okay, so I said a lot of things in a short period of time. If you get it all, it's fine. One other thing that I did not remember, and I happened to see this week, since we had the last session, was that in the Zohar, the main sources of the Kabbalah, it says that the word Bereshit is actually comprised of Bet and Reshit. Bet is the number 2, is the Bet, and Reshit is the Aleph, is the source. And the two are actually one, right? The Torah writes it as one word because they're actually one, but they're separated into two functions to create this duality. Just like the Torah says, a man should leave his parents and cleave to his wife and marry his wife and become like one flesh. That's what the Aleph and Bet do. Okay, and we said last week also that the Aleph-Bet combination exists at different levels or different scales. It can exist on the worldly level. It can exist between man and woman, between man and his wife. And it can exist between a positive and a negative charge of an atom or electricity, or the north or south of the magnet, or matter and antimatter. Or if you're talking about philosophy, thesis and antithesis. Somebody has an idea, a thesis, and somebody will say, on the other hand, give a perfectly great argument why things are completely different. And then you've got two arguments that are both valid, and you got to try and deal with them. So that's where we got to till now. Any questions before we page down? And that is the introduction to the next letter, which is, of course, Gimel. Okay. So Gimel, what does Gimel mean? Okay, remember we had 5 different qualities. And you'll see here that I've shaded out the sound because I'm not aware of any limud, anything that we learn out from the Gimel. In fact, most of the letters you don't learn from the sound, with the exception of Aleph and Bet. And I think when we'll get to Vav and Mem also, but most of them will be like this. But we see the other qualities. So let's go in order and see what it means. So the word Gimel, gomel, means to bestow, right? When somebody does chesed, when somebody does an act of loving kindness, it's called gomel chasadim, okay? We know also that a camel is called the gamal, okay? And then something I also saw that I wasn't aware of before, that you can split the word gimel into two words, gimel, that a gay in Hebrew is a valley, so called an emek, okay? For example, they call the valley just outside the old city, where they have a lot of cultural events, they call it Gay Ben Hinnom, the valley of literally Gehenom. Why is it called Gay Ben Hinnom? First of all, it's a valley, but also the blood used to, from all the sacrifices, the temple used to flow down there, and so it was called Gay Ben Hinnom, and that's where the word Gehenom comes from. The Gay is a valley, and Mal is speech. Okay, le mamel in modern Hebrew is to mumble, to talk. So something about this. The word gamel is a combination of speech going into a valley. A valley is an open space where everything seems to collect, where everything rolls down into the valley. Okay, we'll try and understand what this means shortly. The numerical value of Gimel is quite easy. It's the third letter, so the numerical value is 3, AlephBet Gimel. What is the number 3? 3 is usually stands for stability. Now, sometimes if you make a chair, or if you buy a chair from certain cheap chain stores, a stool, say, and it's got 4 legs, it'll be unstable, or a table, right? And you have to stick some paper or something underneath to stop it wobbling. But if your table or chair has only got 3 legs, it'll always be stable. Whenever you have 3, there's no ways that they cannot be stable. Another example of this, or a different application of the stability of 3, is the triangle. Right? If you have a square, even though if the joints are not very tight, they can move back and forth, even though the sides stay the same, and the square would turn into a star, right? You could go like that or like that. But if you have a triangle with certain sides, you'll never, ever be able to change the angle, right? That's why trigonometry works, but nobody wants to learn trigonometry at the moment. So, so 3 represents stability, okay? Now let's look at the shape of the Gimel. Okay, remember we said the words are, all the letters are made up of yuds and or gimels. So, and or vavs, thank you, Nate. And so we see that there's a vav going from the top to the bottom. Okay, and we also see that there's a little yud, upside down yud in the front. Reminds us a little bit of the yud of the aleph, the bottom yud of the aleph, right? Also falling off to the left-hand side on the bottom, upside down, from the diagonal above. So what does this come to teach us? And finally, the first word that begins with the Gimel in the Torah is actually, we jump all the way to chapter 2 in Breshit. You know, it's the whole of chapter 1, there is not one word that begins with a Gimel. And checked on the computer, and this word is gan. Vayita Hashem Elokim gan be'eden mikeden vayasim sham et adam sheyatza. Hashem, God, made this garden in Eden, mikedem, in the east. Okay, we can describe what the east means in a moment. And there he put the man that he created. So let's try and see what this all means, okay? The idea of, we mentioned earlier that the Aleph and the Bet, whenever you have the number 2 in numerology, are the two opposites, are thesis and antithesis. What always comes after thesis and antithesis is synthesis. In other words, you got one extreme idea, you got another extreme idea, so you can see them as two opposites, or you can find a way of trying to blend them together to get something that's more perfect. And the classic example, of course, is a man and a woman coming together to become a couple. Okay, and the man has qualities that the woman doesn't have, and vice versa. And very often they can be contradictory, right? And that contradiction very often causes tensions and difficulties, even in good marriages. And however, they provide the basis for completion. We each can fill in where the other is lacking. And then if you have that completion, if you have where each one fills in the gap where the other one doesn't, that is stability. And that's why number 3, as we mentioned, is from a geometrical point of view, and an engineering point of view, is a very stable number. By the way, if you'll see in structures that are built, that the strength is important, like big buildings, whatever, often in the structure, they'll fill in the squares with lots of triangles, because the nature of the triangle is that it's stable and cannot be moved. So that's what happens. That's what the number 3 is. Okay. Let's see how this falls in with the things that we saw. Till now, we had Aleph and we had Bet. Now we put them together as Av, but the truth is that they weren't put together. When they come together, they can do Gimel. When they come together, then they're complete. Then they can do well. They can bestow goodness to other people. And that's why in the Gemara, I think I mentioned on our first session, there's a lovely Gemara in the Tractate of Shabbat that says that something that the young children have said. One of the rabbis, they said he's heard something from one of the young children, and what he heard is so great that he hasn't heard anything so special like this since the days of Joshua. And this is unbelievable. Little kids are saying something, but it's so great that it comes from the days of Joshua. And on the one hand, if it's little kids, it can't be serious. On the other hand, if it's so great that no rabbi has said it since the days of Joshua, it must be very big. So I think it's telling us that there's something intrinsic that this learning that these kids are saying, it doesn't come from theoretical learning, it comes from themselves, it comes from the world, from the nature. And that's why it comes from kids. I haven't seen that explanation written, but that's my explanation. And what they say is they take each of the letters, AlephBet, and what does that mean? And then it comes to Gimel Dalet. They do all the letters in pairs, and the word Gimel Dalet stands for gomel Dalim, to bestow goodness to people who are downtrodden, who are people. So you see that the gomel has got the ability to, by bestowing, it's got the ability to connect to other people and to give to other people. And that is what the Gimel does. And that's why it is also gay and mal, right? When you speak to somebody, and definitely if you speak to them and comfort them in a way, but anytime you speak to somebody, you create this connection through speech. And that's why it's mal, the talking, the malel, that goes into the gay, gimel. Okay. I haven't seen anything written about why a camel is called a gamal. Maybe any of you have ideas? I don't know, maybe because it takes us through the desert and helps us survive in very extreme condition. Maybe that's why it's considered doing an act of loving kindness. I'm not sure. And now the shape is interesting also, right? The Vav reaches from the heights. I'm reading what I've written here, and provides what it has received to the upside down yud below. Okay, similar to the Aleph. In other words, that's what bestowing is. The Gimel takes what it's got from the Av, from the Aleph and Bet, which create its creation together, and says, you know what? Recently, one of my neighbors, His brother in America passed away from not from corona, actually from the vaccine. And we're talking about him. My friend became religious in America many years ago, and his brother's not religious. And we're asking about the family, about the children, whatever. And this was a couple that decided to get married. They're, I think they're in their 50s or early 60s, and they never had children because they decided that they don't need to have children. They just need each other. So that's like the Aleph and Bet coming together, and that's where it ends. But here, the Gimel tells us, no, the purpose of us creating a complete world is in order to gomel, is in order to give forth. And that's why Gimel is the next stage in the alphabet. In other words, the Aleph has prepared the spiritual source, the Bet has given it as an infrastructure, and Gimel says, wow, let's hand it off to the rest of the alphabet. That is the bestowing, that is the Gimel. And how's it doing it? By the Vav, which is, we says like a pipe, draws the shefa, the goodness from above, and gives it to the upside down Yud, which is us down on the bottom, which we say is actually a reflection of Hashem. And that is what, in fact, what a garden is, and especially the Garden of Eden. But let's talk generally about a gun or a gina. Okay, what we do in a garden, we take land, which seems like it's got nothing. We take seeds and water and maybe minerals, which are more like the Aleph. And dafka, by putting these two together, you get the gun. And then from having a gun, people can eat fruit. Humanity and animals and even our dog can eat the grass. We've got the artificial grass, and that's the creation of the gun. So obviously, Gan Eden is a spiritual garden, right? But the same principle, again, mentioning the fractals that we discussed earlier, the same principle would describe in the dissemination of the spiritual goodness afterwards the dissemination of the physical goodness. And just to complete the pasuk, why is it written Mikedem? Mikedem is in the east, because that's where the sun comes from, right? This also hints to us that the source of the gun, of this influence of the garden, comes from the beginning of the light, which is the AlephBet. That is the east. That's where the sun rises in the morning. So that's what I think we can learn from, based on what mainly Rav Kook's book and the other books, what we can learn from the letter Gimel. Just summarizing in one sentence at the end, and then if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to open it up. That the Gimel is taking the combination work of Aleph and Bet and turning it into something practical, which is bestowing the goodness forward, passing it on to the next generation or the next set of letters.
What about the nun in Gimel?
There isn't really. I can see why you say this looks like a nun.
Clearly a nun. If you chop off that little.
Yeah. When you draw it, it's interesting you say that. I think also we're influenced by the script writing that we see. But the Sofer Stam, when you do writing for a Torah, the way they do it is they write this vav and then afterwards they add the yud. As far as I know, I haven't seen anything written that the gimel is a nun. I'll take it to Hamid to look if there is anything written like that. It's interesting. That's how you make the word gun. But I haven't seen anything written on that. I don't want to say things time. As we said in last week's lecture, that I don't want to call it a lecture. Last week's session, that if there's some ideas that we can say from ourselves, but I want to 95% of what we're saying here is things that have been sent down from generation to generation, and we believe they're godly. They're not just things that we make up, because otherwise anybody can make up anything and there's no end. So I'll check that up. It's an interesting question, Ed.
Yehuda, is it just a question? Your gimel at the top of the page has got three little chochos on the top. Is that just
right.
style, or what is that? Does that symbolize nothing to? Because out of the three letters that we've looked at, this is the only one that's got decoration.
Very, very good question. You remember we spoke about letters, and we spoke about the vowels, the nikud. I think we also spoke about the trop, right? The ta'amim, which is the music that we learn when we learn for the bar mitzvah. And there is something else in between the letters and the nikud. There's something called crowns. Shagat, guts. Those are the letters, 5 letters in the alphabet, and Gimel's the first one that we meet that have got crowns. And please God, when we finish from Aleph to Taf, we'll learn exactly why dafka those letters have got crowns and not other letters have got crowns.
So now you're saying I've got to wait like 30 weeks until we get there.
20 if we do it every week. Yeah. I don't know, maybe for a modest price we could give you a sneak preview, but
I'm patient.
yeah, but the truth is that I don't remember the answer directly myself. That's why I'm not answering. Good. Any other questions?
Now I'm stuck with the thing with the gamal. Why is it a gamal?
Yeah.
And the only thing that's coming to me is the shape of the hump of a camel is like a triangle.
Wow.
Is a triangle.
I never thought of that, right? Yeah, you get camels with 2 humps and camels with 1 hump. So the 1 hump camel is like a triangle.
Yeah, and the 2 humps as well. The triangle would be between the 2.
Upside down triangle. That's interesting.
An upside down triangle.
Okay, when we get to the shin, if we still remember, I'll say something on that, but I don't want to confuse the issue now. Yeah, it could be, like the gamal, he drinks a fortune of water, as we know. And then he can take that shefa, that abundance, and take us through the desert. He doesn't give it back to you to drink. That he doesn't do. I don't know if I'd want to drink it from him. But he takes that and uses it to lead you through the desert. Maybe that's a kind of bestowing of good. Again, but that's something for a hypothesis, not something that I've seen written anyway.
What's a gomel?
Gomel is to bestow.
But isn't there a gomel?
Oh, birkat
a
gomel.
man or something?
What's the little man who lives in Prague? In the shul in Prague.
The Maral of Prague, the golem. No, that's a golem.
That's a golem.
With a mem. Yeah. Okay. Okay. But we say a bracha when a person, something good happens to him. You say numerical, then you say birkat gomel in shul.
Yeah.
Right? Or a woman has a baby, we have the custom of saying birkat gomel. So what's the gomel? A gomel chayavim tovot, that Hashem has done this goodness to us. That's exactly the same gomel. Very good. So thank you all for listening, and the recording will come later. All the best.
Good.
Thank you.